Good afternoon, everyone. It's very exciting to join this session, which, as session owner, the ICT Agency of Sri Lanka has put together. We will first start with discussing about the Startup Nation strategy with our eminent panel. And then we will have two very interesting panel discussions, one in Sinhala, one in Tamil, talking about how to build tech companies from anywhere in the country. And we'll have some interesting panelists on board for that as well. So my name is Sachindra. I represent the ICT Agency of Sri Lanka, who's the national partner of this. And I will be setting the premise or the foundation for the panel discussion to come in a few slides that I will be using. So the startup ecosystem of Sri Lanka has gone through a journey, which is more than a decade. And you could see that as ICTA has also been part of it from the inception even to now. And there had been many ecosystem players, and it had grown throughout the years, and we're all connected, and we've all had our fair shares in building the ecosystem. In 2020, with the various other work that we also have at ICTA, building the tech startup ecosystem, we wanted to work with the large ecosystem, which also came as a request on building a strategy for the startup ecosystem in Sri Lanka. So to do that, first, we tied up with the PwC to publish a report which captured the impediments that startups faced at the various stages of the life cycle and an action plan. So this report captured 29 impediments, which have been put into 12 categories, as you see on screen. And we have started engaging with 19 different authorities who are working on a 44-point action plan in order to remove those impediments that we captured before. Along with PwC, we also engaged with Startup Genome. And I should reiterate that the methodology adopted by PwC and Genome in understanding the ecosystem is based on surveys where more than 100 startups contributed. I should thank them for that. And also ecosystem players. In the PwC survey, we had about 6 focus groups. We had about 30 ecosystem players contributing as key informants. Similarly, in the Startup Genome report as well, we had more than 100 startups contributing and 10 to 15 ecosystem players giving input. So the Startup Genome report is quite interesting, and they based it on the global framework that they've been using. For those who don't know Startup Genome, it's the Gartner of the startup ecosystem. What is Gartner to the IT industry, the technology industry? It's a global research and analyst firm, and where they use a success factor model to benchmark various ecosystems. They have a huge member network, which Sri Lanka is also part of. So they use the success factor model and then map Sri Lanka to the activation phase. So activation phase is the earliest phase in terms of the ecosystem lifecycle model. And they focused on 3 main areas. These 3 main areas, as they say, is the most important factors for an activation stage ecosystem to really look at. The 3 are not in hierarchical order. It's just that 3 main areas have to work in tangent for us to take the activation stage ecosystem to the next stage, which is globalization stage. So they have mapped Sri Lanka. As you see, our startup output is about 450 startups in our ecosystem, and startup density is quite low, but also to say that there's much more potential to increase startups in an ecosystem like ours. We really need to invest in increasing the female founders of our startup ecosystem. It's much lower than the global average, as you see. From analysis of various startup ecosystems, including Silicon Valley, Genome points out that if you want to increase the number of startups, that homegrown startups are the majority of all these ecosystems. Sometimes you might think it's direct attraction where we invite foreign entities to come and set up. It's not the case. It's always been homegrown startups which have really spurred the growth in the startup ecosystem in the indicators as well. Another very important factor to grow the number of startups in ecosystem is its local connectedness. Now, even though we think that we are very connected in our ecosystem, we realized that the sense of community index that they look at in the variable of local connectedness showed us that founders in Sri Lanka have very fewer relationships with other founders, investors, and experts. So that's what they look at. What are the strong relationships that founders directly have with these entities? So this was quite a eye opener for us as well. The second main component, the first was the increasing startup output. Second main component is called startup quality. So three main areas on how we increase startup quality: founder know-how, custom access, and talent access. So founder know-how means does do our founders have connections with global entities or global knowledge so that they can realize what type of products are leading, what are failing, what type of business models are leading, what are failing. So that know-how. And Sri Lanka, as you see, we have more to reach the activation average. So this activation average is for similar ecosystems in the activation stage. What is the average? We also see that this could be a reason that some of our startups are not able to claim globally leading products or have global strategies. I mean, these are assessment of our ecosystem, which shows that there is so much that we can do. There is so much potential for us to work on our ecosystem to get there. And for an ecosystem of our nature, which is a smaller domestic market, what Genome also suggests is that we have to think about foreign customers from the start. And in our ecosystem, it's about 30%, but less than activation average that we have foreign customers for our products that are built through the ecosystem. It also happens to be, in fact, of increasing startup quality, experienced engineers is a really important thing. But even though Sri Lanka has a really big workforce of technology engineers, it seems that startups are finding it hard to attract them. It's far below activation average, as you see on the slide, and also experienced growth engineers. So from the various solutions that Genome has provided, by the way, I will be sharing all these slides with you later. This is extracted from a much larger slide deck, but I will be sharing the extract with you if you want to note it down. So coming back to the slide, from the various solutions that they have given us to increase startup quality, subsector focus programs and innovation centers is one of the main things that they're highlighting, subsector focus. So let's move on to the third area of focus according to Genome. First is startup output, second is startup quality, third is increasing early stage funding. So this is analysis of Sri Lanka, that is the dotted line right below, of seed funding availability as per startup output as a percentage. And as you see, it has been quite low. And looking at some of the other ecosystems, Singapore, Hong Kong, London, New York, this is a small case study which was showed about Hong Kong, where they increased the Series A funding without addressing the seed funding gap, where they have used this as a case study to tell us that increasing the pre-seed and fulfilling the pre-seed and seed gap is very important. Otherwise, it will hit badly during our Series A. So early stage funding. Finally, to sum it up all, I've gone very fast, I know, just to leave time for a very healthy panel discussion. I will share the slides, but to summing it up all, ICTA, with the vision of having a strategy for the startup ecosystem, engaged with very eminent consultants groups, Startup Genome and PwC. We put together a startup impediments report and identified an action plan for that. We worked with Genome to identify where are we in benchmark with global startup ecosystems and what are our priorities for us to move forward. So encapsulating all of them, I have put this one slide. This is something that ICTA as a startup ecosystem pillar would invite everyone to work with, collaborate towards a startup nation. And as the number one most important thing, inclusivity, that our startups are, that we work with startups around the country and our startups have positive impact and they're sustainable. We will work with various bodies in the government and private sector to ensure that there is startup and investor friendly government and legal policies, that our startups are globally recognized, the tech startup founders are and the startups are, that we will have entrepreneur education system across our country in primary, secondary, and tertiary, and that ecosystem will be locally and globally connected. So this is the startup nation, or the vision for a startup nation, which we are inviting you to collaborate with us. So moving on, with this premise and setting this groundwork, I would switch off my slides now and introduce my panelists. So for this panel, I've invited, I would say, more than panelists. They have been friends for more than 11 years, and all who have worked in the startup ecosystem and seen startup ecosystem grow and have invested time, invested energy, invested mind space. And I have a lot of respect for all three of them. So Chalinda Abekon, who's currently the CEO of the Lankan Angel Network. We started our journey at ICT together back in 2010. And throughout those years, both of us have been working with the ecosystem. Chalinda is a specialist in terms of investment, investment and funding related knowledge, where he has worked with quite a number of startups, investors into grooming this ecosystem. And Lakmini, who is no stranger to any audience, who's been a leading entrepreneur, female entrepreneur in our ecosystem, and right now representing BoardPack, the entrepreneurial journey that she has taken on after starting Iron One, and so much of interesting things for Lakmini to share, and so much of commitment that Lakmini has towards his ecosystem. And next, Kalinga, I think we met back in 2010. Kalinga from Bandarawela, left his job at IFS and went to work in Bandarawela, and then started up a community, which is now become the UWA Startup Hub. So many interesting ideas that Kalinga would have in building community, which we will move on to. So that's a short profile of why these panelists are suited to talk about the startup nation or the tech startup ecosystem strategy of Sri Lanka. And I think the time is 2:40. We have, I think we started about 5 minutes early, so we have a lot of time to discuss. I'll shoot off with questions and maybe starting with Kalinga. So the startup genome assessment looked at three main important areas and asked us to focus on the startup output, startup quality, and increasing seed funding. So in terms of increasing startup output, Kalinga, do you think that the university system can increase the startup output of Sri Lanka? You being working at the university for a long time, I would think would be a key person to shed some light on this. Kalinga?
So when it comes to the universities, in like relatively, when we are working in the present situation, the universities is having a few initiatives and for promoting the entrepreneurship, and a lot of curriculums are having entrepreneurship or entrepreneurship related subjects in their curriculum to promote the entrepreneurship. And there's a very interesting thing is happening with the guidance of the UGC University Grants Commission for linking the businesses with the universities called UBLC, University Business Linkage Cell. So this is available on all the state universities here in Sri Lanka for promoting the innovation and the entrepreneurship. So other than that, they are like when we are working with students now, students are more tend to work with startups and to start something. Yes, the universities are helping at the moment for promoting the entrepreneurship here in the country, and it needs to help, and it does increasing the contribution to the entrepreneurship at the moment. So that's what I can tell from the universities level.
Thank you, Kalinga. And I should happy to say, as ICTA, we have developed a framework called entrepreneurial universities, or I would call it better entrepreneurial universities. And we are also engaging with the UBLCs and to inculcate that framework or to adopt that framework in universities so that there'll be the inculcating of entrepreneurial mindset will be established. So while we talk about universities and the potential entrepreneur population, my next question is to Lakshmini. The percentage of female founders, as we saw, is less than global average. Uh, and in terms of us being even at the activation stage, it's less than the activation stage average. Why do you think this is? It's also, I need to also note that the PwC impediments report did not specifically capture any impediments which are specific for female founders or females in terms of impediments, any challenges which are there in our regulatory system. But still, we don't have or see the number coming out. Why do you think this is, Lakshmini, and what kind of conducive environment can we create for females to better encourage female founders to come up?
So thanks, Sashindra. It's a topic that we constantly talk about, and it's a very important one because when we talk about capacity, the population itself is like 50-50, right? So interestingly, what we see is now you asked why. So if you look at the analysis of it now, it's a 8% versus 92% based on the genome report. So it's quite drastic. But starting out, if you take the mathematics stream and workforce, so the workforce is, I believe, it's about 180,000 currently. So there, it's only about 20% females. So there itself, that drop has happened, Sachindra. And then if you take it out of them, when you take the numbers, again, it has dropped. But you can see that drop has first happened at that point and then drop. But essentially, what I'm seeing is that some of the important things that you talked about. So, of course, starting with the university part, the social awareness that possibly a career in IT is as good as a career in banking or some other very reputed sort of traditional areas is one thing. So getting into becoming a founder as a female, it's probably not advocated by parents or teachers or the society. So that's something that I know that SLASCOM, FITIS, ICTA, lots of these organizations are already doing a lot of work on it. But having said that, this local connectedness that you pointed out, there's a lot of that going on for in general. I mean, I know that like even Charlinder's group, the LAN, or everybody is working on local connectedness, which is itself is quite low. And then when it comes to female participation, I mean, we all know that if you take an event in ICT, the female participation is much lower. So obviously the local connections, that whole aspect needs possibly some special awareness. And I do know, Satyendra, that you and I spoke about it as well. And you were talking about if you take spiralation, I mean, since you invited us for judging, we know that the number of applicants itself is so low. That's a representation of the number of founders, right, who are coming forward to even ask for a grant. And so if that number is low, obviously funding is low. It's all representative. So in that sense, I know that you and I talked about possibly having a special one for females, just females only spiralation or females only disrupt Asia. I mean, conceptually. So these are things possibly that we will see in the future, and definitely those will make that local connectedness of females drive up. So you're right. I mean, impediments, physical impediments are not there. It's more social, that kind of thing that we will have to pay attention to. And I mean, honestly, when I started, there was no ecosystem at all. So most of the startups that you see, which are little mature female ones, have been started over 6-7 years ago. I can mention some names like Emojot, Shahani, Z Messenger, Chayani. There's many, like even Linda, who's doing AI Academy. So there's several known very good female entrepreneurs in the industry, but they haven't really come through the organic ecosystem. which we are trying to build. So we have a lot of work, I agree. And I'm really sure that with those efforts, and I know that there are efforts like female hackathons, the Women's Forum of SLASCOM, which Shalinda also is supporting. I mean, I know all of you are supporting. There's a lot of women-focused things attempted. And as it matures, I believe that that impediment of the local connectors is to go away. And honestly, if you look at the female founders who have actually done the work and had companies, set up companies, those are doing really well. So that's one. And I also wanted to point out, you talked about that subsector, the niche subsector. That's a quite an interesting thing, in fact, because usually a niche subsector allows us to leapfrog. They talk about this fourth industrial revolution, fourth generation technologies, allowing countries to leapfrog from third world to first world. So typically, I kind of believe that the female founder, if they are focused and given grants and a focus on, let's say, AI is very statistical. It's definitely good. I'm sure females are very good at it. So that kind of area, which has a high demand in international. So I mean, I was just doing some research. I mean, if you look at most of the biggest, very good deals going through are related to AI, and they're not just in the US. They're in like Singapore, India, all over. So I just jotted down some just to mention, like for example, Apple, the video self-learning billings. I mean, then there's the space technologies, a UK firm by Facebook that is just real-time 3D maps for drones and logistics to use. So there's a lot of that which we call niche right now, and we call it really special. It's a timing, right? But in 10 years' time, it will be very standard technology. So I really believe that if we can focus in Sri Lanka as a national endeavor, definitely for females to get into these AI areas and sort of leapfrog, and not just females, actually Sri Lanka itself, if we can set up some interesting startups of that nature, through spiralation, etc., I'm sure we can overcome, definitely get those numbers up. So that's kind of what I'd like to share at the moment, Sachindra.
That's a very interesting thought, if I captured right, was where we focus on a subsector and subsector and females together. So it's AI startups, subsector focus, but attracting females. I know there is a Women in Data Science program which is going on. Last week there were quite a lot. John Keels had one. So what you're saying is that's very interesting. So Shalinda, since Punya also mentioned the I Am Her initiative, so she mentioned about a subsector focused female-led startups. That's a very interesting thought. Not even thought about it. So would you have comments to add on that? Plus, I will also want you to talk about in terms of with the startup output which is coming in right now, the 450 startups. Genome says that there is a dearth of early stage funding, and would like you to comment on this as well. So two things.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sachindra and FITIS and rest of the organizations for, first of all, for having me and for organizing and putting this up. With regards to the female entrepreneurship side of things, I think we've been evaluating about 200 companies in the last 6 months through 2 cycles. And what we see, the first thing that I've noticed, and obviously the way that you need to look at these things is that rather than looking at it, what was there last year or the year before, you need to kind of look at the last 10 years and kind of, figure out how have you grown. Then only can you really understand the growth. So if you really look at it, when we started this whole thing in 2010, it was only doctor, lawyer, engineer. And if you said that, you want to be an entrepreneur, the feedback that you got was, okay, you were not smart enough to get a job, hence you're starting a company, which is the complete opposite right now. It's been accepted by society. So we've evolved throughout time. And I see the same thing with female entrepreneurship as well. So we will be having our second cohort, LP meeting towards the end of this month. And we have 4 companies who are shortlisted for that. And all 4 have at least one female co-founder. So the interesting thing that I see is that yes, the pure number of female founder companies might be low, but we are seeing a drastic increase in females being there as co-founders when the company starts. And we do a lot of work because of the applications that we get. When you look at the Gen Zs that are applying, you almost don't see any this whole gender imbalance. It's a complete mix most of the time. And I think that that's the evolution. If you look at, from the Gen X to us, where we are part of Gen Y and then the Gen Z. So I think the evolution is taking us there. And obviously the interventions that have, every organization that has, taken place in the past have obviously contributed towards all of these things. In the future, I think in the next 2 to 3 years, I think as Lakshmini mentioned, once we do have the subsector focus, I think, hackathons are happening. So all of these things, end of the day, encourages and shows that there is opportunity and there is people to support you in that journey. Then you will start finding, companies where it's completely, or larger. But for us, of course, we like to look at a mix. When you're also investing, we're not really prejudiced about the gender side of it. It's about, what's the team composition. But one important thing that I've noticed is that this whole mix, because I remember if you look at 5 years ago, the biggest challenge for the portfolio companies that I used to manage when we were hiring, we would get an engineer who is a female, and then all of a sudden, how do you hire this person? How do you arrange a, kind of a culture where that is welcoming, because you're not used to it. So this is something that all the guys used to have. And then, we used to connect them with, other large organizations, connect them with the HR folks to say, how do you, conduct your, because when you're in a startup, you're like a family. Everybody, kind of the language that you use is very colloquial, very loose language. So you can't now really have, all of that. But now that has completely changed. Coming back to your point in terms of increasing the seed funding, I think we've already raised, our angel fund. We started deploying the capital. We are also looking at raising another fund, slightly more larger, and the work will start Q1 of next year. So all of these things are taking place. There's a lot more interest. Even the fact that when we did close our first investment, and how the strategy works is that when we do identify a company, the 50% of the ask is invested by the fund. So we act as the lead investor, and our LPs would tag along with us for the balance 50%. So the balance 50%, we closed it in a week, literally by announcing from the time that we announced. So there's a lot of appetite in investors into investing in technology companies. We've been getting continuously getting a lot of requests for people to be part of the fund. So all of these things, I think, falling into place. Obviously, we've had I think the challenge that Sri Lanka also had this stop go phase that we go through, whether it's Easter Sunday and now the pandemic, but we've kind of pushed through all of these things.
Chalendra, what you would say is that with the gradual growth of startups, that we will see a gradual growth of seed funding availability as well.
I think it is. So Sachendra, the thing is, if you look at even globally, even in the West, it's only about 2% of the companies that get funded. That's a global average, right? So in Sri Lanka right now, let's say we have 400 companies. By those mathematics, you're looking at 8 companies then. And when you go on to follow-on funding, VC funding, that number then drastically drops to again about 0.2%, between 0.2% to 0.5%. These are companies who have secured their seed rounds, have gained enough traction to attract the VC funding to come in place. So the volume part of it definitely is important. But where we work is obviously, Sri Lanka being a small nation, it's very hard for us to play in the numbers game. So we have to play in the quality game. And that's how even our products are marketed to the rest of the world. It's not about the quantity, it's about the quality of our engineering and our ingenuity that gets marketed outside. But I think the reason why we are seeing an influx of investors, or there's investor interest coming in, is purely because the investors see a lot of opportunity that are in Sri Lanka, and now enough people have gone and pitched to all these investors as well on their own through introductions and so on. So they know that there is hunger, there is appetite within the ecosystem, and people are trying to build great companies that have global potential, if not regional potential. So as more and more, it's a chicken and egg situation, obviously, but I think both are happening relatively at the same pace at the moment.
Okay. Thank you for that. So they're also getting questions from the audience, and there's one related to funding which I will post to you later, Chalinda.
Sure.
Coming to Kalinga, so I will tie up these questions that I have and what comes from the audience. So there's an audience question asking, any specific efforts from universities to train engineers coming from rural areas in Sri Lanka? And it says this will help have regional IT businesses. Any specific efforts from universities to train engineers coming from rural areas, which will help having regional IT businesses? So I would tie this up to exactly what you are doing in the Bandara to IT hub, and ask you the question also tying up to the fact that about local connectedness, and the fact that Genome data points that there is less connections that startups have with other startup founders have with other founders, experts, and investors. In that sense, you being a startup at one point in Bandarawela, how did you tackle this? Being in a very distant area from what everyone thinks Colombo is.
So for your first question, it's there's the short answer is no, right? There's no approach like that. So let me give you why we don't have that kind of approach. Is we treat the students in the same manner when it comes to the university, especially in the state university, whether they are coming from a rich background or from poor background, or we don't care. Its education is very fair. But even when it comes to the universities, recently the Open University has introduced a new degree with a partnering with SLASCOM as well, for graduating 10,000 students using distant learning methods. So this is kind of a good approach that I've seen. Like if somebody is asking that what has happened after the free education, this is something that has happened. This is one of the biggest things that has happened by introducing this free distance learning degree, right? So how we are tackling the problem is a very interesting thing, right? So let me give you my experience and how we have tackled and how we have overcome this problem. When we started the businesses almost 9 years ago, right? We didn't have the attraction from the graduates. It's a small shop, right? So what we have done is, like, I did a bit of an assessment. What are the qualifications of a software engineer? Is it a degree? Is it a diploma? Right? So these are like cultural barriers for harnessing the best talent from the community. So we raised down the barriers and we hunted the people. A lot of people joined with us, and still they are working with us. Then they got their degrees because they want to have a degree, right? So not because they were selected for the degree, they want to have a degree because that is helping for their job, right? I think what we need to do is we need to remove this, like when we are putting a job posting, all the big companies, we need to remove that this is the qualification, like the PSC, whatever the thing, right? This is where the barrier is. This is one of the first barrier for harnessing the talent in the country. The other thing is, when it comes to education, right? The education needs to be free. It needs to be accessed freely, and we don't want to have the barriers for the education. But when it comes to Sri Lankan um, landscape, we have a lot of barriers. We have a money problem. We have the A-level barrier to get a degree, right? So even we can't accommodate 10,000 students for the state universities at the moment. Additionally, I think for this last year it's like 41,000 or something like that. But for a single intake, it is it's really hard. But we need to find our alternative methods of converting at least existing graduates, whether they have, I believe that they are underutilized graduates. Sometimes they are working at home, becoming a housewife. They are not contributing to the economy. We need to find a kind of a mechanism to convert these existing graduates into IT workforce, plus the people who are going to drop out from the A-levels, drop out from the university entrance, and from the O-levels as well. Yes, we have a couple of systems to address this problem, but it is not working. But if we have created some kind of a certification program remotely with very low price barrier, then this might be helpful for getting the people on board. So that's what I'm thinking of. And for us, we have practically used this kind of a method to get the talent, and it has worked. It has worked a lot, because one of some of the best products that we have built came from these people, and their creativity is quite different, what I'm saying. This is practically done. So what I'm thinking of having something like that will be helpful for having this startup economic.
Kanika, just to reiterate one of the other questions that I asked, being a startup in Bandarawela or building tech company in Bandarawela, how does a founder connect with other founders? How do they connect with experts? How do they connect with investors? Maybe how did you do it?
It's a very interesting question. So I didn't have any connections at the first place, right? Then the internet and the social media has helped, and a lot of postings on the social media saying I'm writing to them and getting some answers. So this is how we have connected to Silicon Valley, to Japan, Europe, and all these countries. We have connected through the internet, and not by like, we haven't had a lot of physical meetings, but through the internet we connected. But one thing that I've seen, like a lot of people are hesitating to write an email, like, you know, but writing an email, it doesn't cost you anything. We are writing an email. If a reply comes, it's a bonus. If it is not, it's nothing, right? So I wrote a lot of emails actually for making connections, making good connections. That's how we are connected. So not many connections, but these connections has helped us to grow.
So the possibilities are endless, and it's just that you put an effort to it.
Yeah.
So taking that cue from connecting globally, coming to Lakshmi again. So genome data shows that by discussing with the startup founders, they have identified that Sri Lanka has fewer global leading products or are global, only a few founders who have certain global strategies. So Lakshmi, why do you think that is, in terms of this aspect that we see in Sri Lanka? And what did you do differently with BoardPack?
Sure. Thanks, Sachindra. That's an interesting question close to my heart. So talking about BoardPack, I mean, just to let you know, it has taken us about 8 years to get to where we are. So when I talk about like 40 countries or 6 countries with officers, Fortune global companies, all that didn't come overnight. I mean, like if I talk about the type of clients, like even let's say India, Central Bank of India, RBI is using us. I mean, who'd think, right, that you'd use a Sri Lankan product? That's just one of them, but so many of that kind of caliber. But being a B2B SaaS product, it takes time. So I sort of thought about a couple of things that might be important. So the first thing is I personally, as a founder, always realized that my vision is global. I wasn't really interested in just local products. So even when we were doing local things, because we funded ourselves with services, and we kept on looking for something that could be a global product. But it's not always easy, Sachindra, to identify something at the point go. So this particular one came from LTB. Ajit Gunawardena, the chairman, wanted a board meeting solution. We had done many different things, many use cases, and this was one of them. But every time we did it, we kind of made it productized as much as possible. And immediately, like Bank of Ceylon wanted it. And honestly, I think it was when we went to Sri Lanka Telecom, my third presentation, Maxis Telecom said, would you like to come over? And product was hardly built. I mean, we were really worried when we did the Maxis meeting. Product wasn't built. We had to like use 2 applications, switch it over. I'm sure anyone who's done product business knows what we're talking about. But we succeeded, and with that confidence, I mean, literally that transformed me. I'm really glad. I don't know whether I would have taken it global within the first 3 months of production, if it was organic. But this happened, and we just said yes. So I would really advise anybody who's doing product not to hold back, because you do 1 company, 2 companies in Sri Lanka. Even if you do 20 companies in Sri Lanka, that's a scale. You go to like overseas country, even Malaysia was 20 to 50 times bigger banks. We suddenly got our use cases correct. And I mean, even up to now, that kind of scale, even in the US, we are fine. We haven't had any volume related issues. The structure was set up. So going early overseas is one thing. There is also this other thing, because now I've done so many different products other than BoardPack also. One of the things that I see, BoardPack is something that we can sell anywhere. In fact, now during COVID, the embassy allowed us to access Russian companies, introduced us to Russian companies. The use case is the same, you just change language. But there are many other products, even in my stack, like for example, the stock trading product. You cannot just sell it everywhere. So we have to work really hard. We have to work with the stock exchanges. We have to change their certification. So when people are looking for products which are global, there are so many different B2B cases. So I'm not saying you have to go the easy route, but if you go the easy route, you can access more countries fast. Then you have to focus on your marketing. So in our case, in BoardPack, I mean, yes, we have to compete functionally and things like that. But the level of difficulty in the product is much less. It's a huge marketing sales game. And coming to that, really, that itself is something, because originally we opened markets, we opened several markets, made it mature, but me and a few others did it. But we can't exponentially scale up in that manner. We have to have a very special global strategy. And there again, there's a lot of challenge, like your local and global connectedness issues. I mean, it's not easy to go and ask someone. There's no other company easily to ask. There's no, Sri Lankan friend to ask. So that's pretty difficult. But I mean, we are global. We have made a lot of global friends who can help us. Sometimes even they cannot help us, because our use case particularly, doesn't fit somebody else's. So you have to, I mean, just like Kalinga mentioned, you have to find your own way. You have to keep trying, write so many emails. It's okay to get no, right? So that's the international side of things, that anyone who tries will succeed. And even when I talked about Maxis inviting us over, typically, I mean, my benchmark is it takes about 3 years to mature a market in terms of our kind of product. I've made lots of mistakes where we thought we can do it in a year. We've pumped a lot of money, didn't work, exited the market thinking it's no good. But now we're going back to those markets. Like as an example, South Africa. Now we have Vodacom South Africa as our partner. Last week, I'd just like to share this good news that the whole local government, SALGA, which is a South African local government agency, signed up with us for BoatPack, 220 potential municipalities.
Congratulations.
Of course, yeah. So we have priority now. But really, it took us 3 years to quit Vodacom, and Vodacom works with government. So we don't have to do all this BBE stuff. They will do it for us. So it's all a journey, Sachindra. I mean, the kind of product we are doing, enterprise, even SaaS, takes time. But I mean, we are going to focus on partnerships. We've done a lot of partnerships even now, but it's going to be a 80 to 90% game of partnerships because we have to cover 100 countries. That's what we're working on now. But having really said that, our type of company is probably some of the traditional companies which build a product, take it ourselves global, that kind of thing. But I see like Nsinga and all these AI type of innovative technology companies, they don't take it global. They immediately get global, a couple of $1 million deals just by making the technology. So this is another thing that, of course, Sri Lankan companies, the next generation, as Chalinda mentions, could look at. I mean, so I guess I covered most of what I wanted to say. And lastly, I just want to mention there are several, I mean, not a lot, but there are like several companies like BoatPack, like Emojot, Edfenid, Orange HRM, Microimage, many more. Sorry if I didn't mention all of them, that have focused on that global way. But when we look at the spiralation or the kind of quality that is coming through, I believe we have to pay a lot of attention to that, because many of them are just looking local, right? And we have to push them to look global is what I see. So yeah, so that's kind of what I wanted to share, Sachindra.
Thank you, Lakshmi. Just taking a point from that, BoatPack and even the stock trade product, you looked at a niche market or a niche product. And we also talk about, I think we've been talking about for a long time, whether Sri Lanka needs to focus on a particular subset. So my question is to Chalinda. So we've been debating on this, whether our accelerators or incubators should be general or should we focus on a particular subsector. I know even the Disrupt Asia forum where we discussed with the speakers in 2019, they were talking about the Israeli friend from Israel was saying to look at our niche area. So do you think after 11 years with this ecosystem that we have a certain niche and that this is the time that we need to focus on this niche areas to increase startup quality in our ecosystem?
Right. I think, Sachin, that what has happened is, I would say that there are certain niche markets that are emerging where we can obviously have an advantage. One being apparel, definitely, because it's second largest revenue earner, and we already have a company, Nsinga, which has gone through that cycle. And similarly, there are various specific segments. Even if you look at, let's say, agriculture, but agriculture, related to tea or related to cinnamon. So we are seeing a little bit of these things, slowly starting to kind of emerge. The main thing that we need to understand is when you look at a sector specific, you need to look at the entire life cycle. So you need to look at how the government will support, how the rest of the organizations will, kind of contribute towards that. That's how, Singapore is known for fintech. and deep tech. Now they're developing deep tech. So if you look at the way that they developed the fintech, it was purely through the government interventions, taking off all the regulatory frameworks, putting in place processes and creating sandbox allow to innovation happen. They're replicating the same strategy for, let's say, deep tech, but that deep tech strategy is happening at the university levels, where it's a lot to do with building capacity around that. So it's a different segment. So in Sri Lanka, I think we are seeing the early signs of potential of having vertical focus or industry specific accelerators or incubators coming in. But I think where we still need to work a lot more is on increasing what Lakshmini said, increasing the quality. And when you think about accelerators or incubators, we'll keep the incubators aside. When you say accelerator, we tend to speak accelerators from a very generic standpoint. You run an accelerator program, but you need to understand, what are you going to accelerate? Are you accelerating the capacity to validate your idea? Typically it would take 3 months. Now you can do it in 1 month. So are you in, what's your value proposition? Are you accelerating the go-to-market? I think that has to have a bit of focus, because that will tell you what type of companies you need to, take or accept to that accelerator. So when we even look at, our portfolio, when we're investing, yes, we are looking for good quality companies, and there is no short of great ideas. But what we feel is that the effort that we need to put in to really build those companies is significantly high or low, depending on the maturity and the experience of these founders and the ability to think global. So that's where, we also need to put a bit of emphasis also. So I think, I ran a industry focused accelerator about, 7 years ago, and that was in the apparel sector. And if you look at the company, some of the companies that were there, so Linear Squared, so the product that they have was actually an idea which was given by Brandix at the time. And even Brandix invested, I think, closer to $30-40, and they just wrote it off, right? So when corporates are coming into, we see a lot of interest from corporates. One of the things where they also want to focus is, how does this particular investment improve my bottom line? Now that's the wrong approach. At least my personal view is that that's a wrong approach. You can't really invest in a company thinking, it'll improve your bottom line in your business. You need to think of it as a separate organization. The challenge, the reason, so what we saw with, 7 years ago was that we were able to build great products, but the selling part was very tough, because you're selling to, Lululemon, Nike, CK, all the big brands. And as a founder needs to have this conversation with a very mature, global giants. And we didn't have that capacity at that stage, but the products were great. And everybody will, look at all of these things when they're evaluating a product or a company, whether it's for investment or as customers. So those are the little things that we need to kind of improve. I think we've come a long way. And like I said, there are certain aspects that are coming in. But by and large, I think for the next I would say 3 to 5 years, it would be a slightly more, wider focus. But definitely it's narrowing down. So we can't be throwing the kitchen sink. We've thrown that for 11 years. Now we need to kind of, streamline and get our focus as well. So that we are doing it even within, internally as LAN. We've had strategy sessions. What is LAN going to be? What's our purpose? Which is why I mentioned that we are raising another fund, because we see there's an opportunity for slightly more mature companies where then our intervention is slightly more lower. And then with a little bit of funding, we can take them to the next stage of growth. I think Sachindra is frozen. Sachindra, you're back?
Yes, I'm back.
Okay, great.
You know the protocol. So did you finish, Shalin?
No, I finished. You weren't gone for a long time, so it's all good.
thankfully. So sorry about that intermission. um, so as Chalendra said, I think from a government standpoint, since we are also looking at the impediments of various sectors in the impediments report that was done, we looked at agriculture, education, health, and the deep tech sector as well. What are those specific impediments that we can remove? And in the phase of acceleration that we have started right now, that's another phase that we are working with Genome and PwC together. We can really put our heads into supporting the enablers who are focusing on niche areas, and also an acceleration strategy for subsectors. I mean, that's where we need to head, as Chandra said, in after 10 years or 11 years of the startup ecosystem. So we have about 7 minutes left, and there's a question on funding, Chandra, which I said I'll post to you. So uh, the question is on, can you explain the different funding types? I think he's more talking about funding stages like seed. Is an example given. So I think more like pre-seed, seed, series A. I think that's what he's talking about. If you can give a short explanation of these different funding stages.
Sure. So, I mean, various markets and various people will have different names, right? Easiest way to understand is when you say pre-seed, you're essentially looking at companies where you just have an idea. You have yourself and maybe a friend. You have some crazy idea, and you might require a bit of capital to build a prototype or an MVP. So which is what, if you're in that stage, then it's known as pre-seed. And typically the funding availability for pre-seed companies in Sri Lanka is very low unless you have your own friends and family who can invest in those companies. So even in other markets, it's usually friends and family who provide that capital. But then obviously, if you look at South Asia, you going and asking your parents to money to buy or start a company is not really common here. You also have to get permission to even go and watch a movie. At least we had to. So starting a company is a little bit off. But that's an Asian thing, I would say, but it's changing. When you say seed funding is when you have a bit of traction, you have maybe build a prototype, you've shown it to a few customers, there is some feedback, and you see that there is potential, and then now you want to raise capital to see do market validation. Again, at this stage, you still have friends, family, relatives who will come in and put in money, but you also have the opportunity to kind of approach angel investors, and that kind of the pool of angel investors. Yes, there are a few here in Sri Lanka. I mean, it's very hard to give a number, but then the best way to get attention from some of these angel investors is to go work your way through a recommendation. So you need to know someone who would know someone who will kind of, it's like getting a bank guarantee, right? So I'd say, okay, these kids are smart, you need to take a chance on them. When we say angel funding, or when you come to your first official round where external investors are coming in, at that stage, early stage funding, which we play in, then you're looking at companies that have a product. You've done some, there is validation, that there is potential, you have a bit of insights from the market coming in, and then we would come and invest. So typically in Sri Lanka, an angel round would go anywhere between 25,000 US dollars to about 250,000 US dollars, 5 million to about 30 million, 40 million. That's the kind of range that you want to be in. And then you have your pre-series A, series A, and it continues depending on how you scale. Obviously, a lot of things matter. The primary thing which remains the same, I would say, is the team. So in your early stage, it's really about the 2 or 3 co-founders. What are the skills, how well they work with each other, and do they have the required skills to take the company, and that remains throughout different stages. But obviously the responsibility kind of grows. So when you go to a series A, you're looking at the management team now. It's not just the founders who's in your second tier, who are the guys who are running the company, because typically what will happen is the founders will be the face of the company. They're doing a lot of the PR and various other partnerships and so on. but then there's a management team that runs that company. So CFO, CIO, who are these people? So those are the kind of funding rounds that are there.
Thanks, Shalinda. So final 3 minutes to wrap up. And I should tell the audience that if you have any questions related to this discussion and any other things to clarify, you can write to startups@icta.lk. That's startups with S @icta.lk. And panelists, can I invite you to share about 45 seconds each? I'm giving a very short time because of this question. What is the most important thing that you would want government to do? I'll give you only 45 seconds to answer this question. So Chalinda, since you're on the screen, you can start. 45 seconds.
I think everybody's on the screen. I don't know. Can I do a pass and come back to the... No, I think the government, I might be biased because I was also part of government. So I need to, confirm that. But I think it's done a great job. And right now, it's more about the hard work that is left, which is the policy. Those are the impediments that we spoke of. I think, that's going to be a lot more hard. So not so much about ecosystem development, but focus on the policy and let the ecosystem, run its own course, I would say.
Got it. Thank you, Shalinda. Lakmini? You're on mute still.
You're on mute, Lakmini.
Sorry about that. So actually, I guess there's many things, but let me focus on the conversation I had with you related to the women-focused, the spy relations and the ecosystem with a bit of niche. I think I guess that would be something quite welcoming to see from the government.
That's very spot on. Okay, you can come into that. Kalinga, 45 seconds, please.
Okay, reducing the barriers for the IT education.
Reducing that
all.
IT education.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So very specific 3 things, and we're on our last minute. Thank you so much, Chalinda, Lakmini, Kalinga, for accepting our invitation and for being part of this panel discussion chaired by ICTA. And thank you to FITIS and all the organizers of Internet Day for making this happen. I know it was a lot of hard work, and I hope the participants benefited from this discussion. The journey has only started, the Startup Nation building process. So please join us and collaborate towards the Startup Nation. Thank you very much and have a pleasant evening.
Right. Thank you all. Take care and
Thank
stay
you.
safe.